Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. This is the weekly Tottenham news review with me, leader Dorset Spur. I'm here to give you my opinion on some of the news stories making the headlines over the last week. I'll let you know how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking about them, and giving you the opportunity to feedback to me how you feel about it and what your views are on all these different stories. Of course, it is international break. And if you're anything like me, I'm not really into it. I'm not a big fan of international football. I'd much prefer to see the Premier League back, even though Tottenham are doing particularly poorly this season. I still feel like I miss it when it's not around. Like I say, not a big fan of international football, but these breaks happen and players seem to be really inspired to want to play for their countries, and so you cannot deny them that opportunity. For me, if we're playing in the European Championships or we're playing in the World Cup, then of course I'm watching the football because there is no other football. So that's what kind of draws me in. But generally speaking, I don't watch the warm-up games or the qualifying games or anything like that. I feel that it's too easy for the big countries to get through. There's no real shocks in it or anything like that, and it kind of gives you a false perspective on where your country is. Obviously, I am very cursed because I am a Tottenham fan, but I'm also an Englishman, and so our expectation is always really high, and our deliverables are always end up being fairly low. Couple of finals, but no cup. Familiar story. Anyway, just kind of picking up on a couple of things from the international break. Of course, Heung-min Son went off to play for South Korea, and he has played both games and doing 90 minutes in one and 89 minutes in the other. So him saying that he's fully fit and raring to go and everything else, I guess you kind of have to believe him. Like I said in the previous episode, not convinced that he's given his best for Spurs this season, and I was concerned that there was an injury in there, but you know, he's still out there and he's still playing his full minutes. The other one that's come up, obviously, Christian Romero. There's always been lots of talk about Christian Romero where he's been unfit for such a long period, and then all of a sudden international football comes back, and lo and behold, Romero is back fit and ready to go. Personally, I think it's probably just a coincidence. I don't think he generally doesn't want to play for Spurs. I do get that. These big games for their countries are really big for him. Of course, he did go off to play against Brazil, and that's a big rivalry there. So I guess he would want to play in that. I don't buy it that he's feigning injury. I wouldn't have thought that was the case. I wouldn't think that the club would allow that with all the medical staff and all the stuff that they have that tells them the fitness of players and all the rest of it. They monitor them so closely. I think it's just a conspiracy theory that we all make up because we're fed up with the fact that Christian Romero is out for long periods of the season, generally speaking. But he did play. He did make a big mistake against Brazil. But of course, the Argentinian press are still saying that Christian Romero is the biggest and best defender in the world at the moment, and it's difficult to argue that when he plays really decent football and is consistent for his country. So they would obviously believe that. I don't disagree. I think he's a great defender, absolutely great defender on his day. Can play really well. It's just that we haven't seen enough of him, and that's the real disappointment from my point of view. Outside of international football, of course, what's also going to be talked about an awful lot is going to be rumours around transfers and all this kind of stuff. So the big news one is Tyler Dibling. We're being told, it's being reported that Southampton want £100 million for this young lad. Played 34 games so far this season with 4 assists and 2 goals. Being reported by Fabrizio Romero, so you kind of think to yourself, well, that must be a fairly kind of strong story. 100 million quid, a lot of money for a teenager in his first real season in the Premier League in a really poor Southampton team that's struggling. if you're going to spend £100 million, for me, I want someone who's coming in who's going to make an absolute big difference to our starting 11, a marquee signing of that sort of nature. I can't see Tottenham paying £100 million for this lad. I don't see him coming into the team and just taking over. I think he's definitely one for the future. He's a player that Tottenham have been reported to be following an awful lot, very, very closely. They really want him, apparently. But I think £100 million at this stage is far, far too much. When you look at Archie Gray, picking him up for 40 million, which we thought was an absolute nightmare amount of money for a young lad. But it shows you that's why they do that kind of business, because you get into the Premier League, you start putting in some decent performances, showing what you're worth, and all of a sudden the cost of you to buy you increases and increases and increases beyond anything, you know, especially with these young sort of British players and so on. It makes it really, really difficult for clubs to compete in that nature. So yeah, I don't see it personally. I guess, you know, Fabrizio Romano is far better at knowing this stuff than I am. But I think if they're looking at £100 million, I don't see Tottenham paying that money for that sort of player. That's like I say, not going to come in and take a first team place off of anyone. He's not going to set the team alight. It's going to be one of those for the future development and so on. Because I personally don't think that Bergvall or Gray would have played the amount of minutes that they had it not been for the injury crisis that we've had. So Ange Postecoglou has been forced into that situation. So I guess their development has been sped up an awful lot due to that situation. I don't think he would have wanted that at the start of the season for sure. And to take on another young lad, great for the future, great for the team development, for the longer term and so on. We've seen us do that a lot. It's what we're kind of planning to do, you know, with the likes of Yang and the other defender, Velocic, is it, or something along those lines anyway. Looking at bringing those players in, it kind of makes sense for him to be on our radar. But like I say, the fee sounds very, very high to me. But listen, if Daniel Levy's got money to burn and he's going to start doing that sort of business, then hopefully Tyler Dibling won't be the only one who's coming in at that sort of money, and maybe we could get some players in that would actually come into the first team and really make us better. Interesting for sure. Of course, from the other perspective, you've then got Romero, apparently really a strong reach from Atletico Madrid, who are desperate for him, and why wouldn't they be? Fantastic player, as I've just said previously. Argentina saying that he's the best defender in the world. So of course, you know, it makes sense that they would want him. But as I said last time when we were talking about Real Madrid, he's under contract. It'd take a big amount of money for him to be removed from the club, especially unless he really, really wants to go and makes it impossible for the club to kind of keep him. But he is under contract, and I would expect him to stay for that contract. We don't want to be losing our best players just like that. You know, we're in a situation now where we want to be building for the future. You can't afford to be losing your best players left, right and centre. We've been there, we've been doing that. We cannot afford to do that again, even if those players really, really want to go. You know, the amount of good players we've lost, if you go back to, you know, Sheringham and Berbatov and Bow, Modric, even Kane, you know, we've had all our best players, you know, taken away from us. Carrick is another one that kind of springs to mind. Even back in the day, Robbie Keane, you know, was off to Liverpool, his boyhood club. So we've been down this road of losing our best players all the time. Can't afford to do that, not at this stage, not whilst you're in this really difficult building scenario. We need to tie these players down and get them to give their best for us and turn, you know, Tottenham into the Real Madrid or the Atletico Madrid or the Manchester United or the Man City or whatever of the future. That's where we should be aiming to go, not just a feeder club, just keep the money pouring in to keep lining people's pockets, for sure. Also talking about transfers, Wanyama, Victor Wanyama has just signed for Dunfermline at 33 years old. Great player, never forget his goal against Liverpool. I loved his passion, I loved his work rate and his effort. Really good player. We had him at a really good period. Unfortunately, it never went on long enough. He's still only 33, so still has some seasons in him. But of course, his best seems to be very much past it. And of course, talking about players that are, I won't use the term past it, but coming towards the end of their career, Jan Vertonghen has said that he will retire at the end of the season, which is, such a shame. Such a shame for such a great player. I really liked Jan. I thought he was, really good, really strong in defence, a great leader, a great role model, and you'll never forget his kind of Superman celebrations. I used to love that, seeing him run around, pulling his shirt open, as if to do the Superman. We all loved him, and alongside with Toby Alderweireld, what a duo they were. Fantastic to see them, to have had them at the club and to have played so well, not just for us but for Belgium as well, and for their time at Ajax and so on. A couple of really good professionals who worked really hard, and shame for them not to have picked up a trophy when they was at Spurs. I'm gutted to have lost some of these real great footballers that have tainted their career with no trophies at the time that they've been at Spurs. It's a real disappointment for them, and it's such a shame. So, but again, great memories of Jan, and hopefully he'll come back to Spurs at some point. Maybe do some punditry or do some legend stuff or stuff like that. It would be great to see him in and around the club. I think we all think very fondly of him for sure. There is talk as well, it's been reported that there may be a summer tour, and it's looking like we will be going to Hong Kong. Now, of course, Tottenham are very big in Asia because of the draw of Heung-min Son, obviously, who's not just a South Korean legend. I mean, he is revered all round Asia. So that would be a massive draw for them. Hong Kong, not a big footballing thing. I think the big thing over there is basketball. I have been to Hong Kong, a great place, great people, really congested, little tiny small apartments and stuff like that, but a beautiful area. I went up into the mountains and did a lovely trail and went to see the Big Buddha and the Crystal Cable Car. So if, like Chris Cowling, I'm sure we'll be going over to Hong Kong. If you haven't been and you get the opportunity to go over there for this tour, honestly, you won't regret it. Taking the Big Buddha, the Crystal Cable Car, as I said, they are worth going to on their own. And it looks like what we're looking to do is to play Arsenal out there. Now, what a match that would be out there in Asia, because Arsenal have a big following in Asia as well. So it would be an obvious money spinner for the club. But again, we talk about things like where you've got players being really tired, playing too much football and all the rest of it, and here we are sorting out a tour going halfway across the world. But that's modern business, that's modern football. That's about getting your brand out there and making sure people know who you are and what you're doing, and trying to get those TV rights, get those shirt sponsorships, get those companies in to do the next deal for whatever it might be. And that's, I guess, is what they need to do. And that's the big draw. And it's interesting, really, because Daniel Levy needs to remember that when he's doing the other deals and doing the other stuff, is to remember that if it wasn't for Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, none of the other stuff would be possible, because it's the football team that's the draw, not the stadium, not the concerts, not the go-karts or whatever. That's all stuff that people will take notice of because of the Tottenham Hotspur Football Club in the first place. Something he probably needs to remember, which kind of brings me onto the next point, because the club have announced that the museum is still a big priority. They are still looking to do that. but that will be part of the hotel phase and so on and so forth. So you're talking about another 18 months away before that gets done. The iconic Bill Nicholson gates will be included in that somewhere along the line. The plan is to have those gates, and I think there is talk of a statue of Bill Nicholson incorporated into all of that, which, you know, in my mind is, you know, it's just taken far too long to have any kind of history built into the surrounding area. I mean, when they built the stadium, they did an awful lot about getting the cockerel recreated and stuff like that, and building polishing the floor with, you know, aggregate from the old stadium, the centre spot in there, and all this kind of stuff. You know, there is a bar there where they've kind of recreated or built a brick wall and it says THFC in it, and that's all been there. And in the shop, you've still got the old dispensary and all this kind of business. So it's disappointing that, considering they went that far, they didn't go any further and celebrate probably the greatest manager Tottenham have ever had. So I think, for me, I think it's far too little, far too late. I know there is talk of the gates being used in the meantime. I understand it's somewhere around the ticket office area, I believe. I might be wrong on that, but I'm sure I read that somewhere, that's what they're kind of looking to do. I think, you know, it would be, you know, for sure they really need to get that. It would be lovely to have an actual statue of Bill Nicholson standing at the gates, like the iconic picture, at somewhere around the stadium, rather than them being used just as a set of gates. Let's make them symbolic. Let's make them stand out and make them, you know, mean something. That would be where I feel we need to go with it. But this is Tottenham Hotspur, and Tottenham Hotspur will do what they want to do in their own time. But as I say, I understand it is part of the hotel development. Again, that's just my understanding. I could be wrong on that. But at least they're still going to be there. At least they're going to be put into place at some point in the future. Let's just hope it's not so long that that everybody who knows what the gates are have forgotten all about them, which will be disappointing. I think, you know, talking of statues, there are some iconic people that should be recognised in the club. You know, you think about people like Steve Perryman, for instance, or Keith Birkinshaw. You know, he's probably our second most decorated manager. He's kind of forgotten and not really spoken about, which I think is an absolute shame. He's the reason I supported Tottenham. I've met him once, and it's the only time in my life, I've got to be honest with you, it's the only time in my life where I've ever been sort of starstruck. You know, where you kind of meet someone and you think, wow, this guy is something else. And it's only because he was the reason I supported Tottenham. You know, he took us up from the second division, winning the FA Cup 2 occasions, winning the UEFA Cup. You know, fantastic manager, fantastic man, and still going strong. I mean, I think he's probably about 90 years old now, but still plays golf and everything else, and a real stature of a man. You know, he oozes class when you meet him. For those of you that haven't, as I say, I've met him, and it's the only time I've ever really been starstruck. So again, another one I think really could do with some kind of recognition by the club. You know, not just him. You know, but like I say, people like, you know, Steve Perryman, for instance, who gave a lot to it. Gary Mabbott, who playing with you know, with diabetes and stuff like that. You know, we've got so many legends of the club. You know, Jimmy Greaves, Cliff Jones. You know, I mean, the list could go on and on and on and on. You know, there are so many legends. The other thing I just wanted to touch on as well is the Djed Spence interview. So Djed Spence did an interview with Rio Ferdinand on his podcast, and there was an interesting bit in it when they were talking about him maybe getting a second chance. Is this your second chance at playing for football? And his view pretty much was, well, I never had a first chance because of the way I was treated. You know, being Conte saying he was a club signing and not really, you know, one for him and all the rest of it, which must be really, really difficult to hear as a player coming in. You know, you're signing for a really big club, it's a dream move to the Premier League, and then your manager is kind of writing you off before you've even kicked a ball. really, really disappointing. And that kind of sums up Conte, really. He only ever wanted what he wanted, and that was it. Always felt that he was too big for the club. That was my view, and that was, you know, whilst I was happy to have him there and expected great things from him, and I agreed with what he said when he lost the plot and got the and kind of stormed out. I think I was at the Southampton game when where he kind of did that afterwards in the conference afterwards, and I didn't disagree with anything he said, and I was fully behind him, but it kind of spelt the end. It just really showed what he thought of the club and where he wanted to go, and I think that's why kind of Postecoglou felt like it was going to be something better, because he was coming to the club and he wanted to be there. So Djed Spence, a bit disappointed with that, I guess, and I can fully understand that, which kind of gives you, like, whilst he carries that arrogance and that self-belief and so on, which is great to see, but I just wonder whether coming across that way, is that what kind of made people think that he had this personality issue, you know, his attitude problem or whatever. He was asked about whether who were the leaders within the club, and he kind of just looked blank. I mean, it was almost a bit embarrassing how he kind of just blanked it, really, as if to say there isn't anybody, you know, there is no kind of leaders in this team. And I thought, oh, that's really telling. That's not a really good look. To be fair, he did talk about Son being a good captain, but not in the way of, you know, geeing people up and shouting at people and all that kind of stuff. He's more of a lead by example type character, which I kind of get. I see that. I believe that that's probably the case, you know, for Son. You think that's probably what he's more likely to do. You know, that's more likely how he's going to come across. I never expected him to kind of be shouting and swearing and kicking people's asses like maybe Roy Keane might do. He's not that sort of person. But yeah, interesting to see that. I did think it was quite odd though. You know, he's sitting on a podcast and he's sat there with dark glasses on. And I'm like, what is that about? You know, and stuff like that kind of makes me wonder whether that's where this idea about his poor attitude comes from. The fact that people think you're too flash or you're too up yourself or whatever. And maybe that's something he needs to think about. But I mean, in terms of his football, he's done his talking on the pitch, and I don't think anyone can deny that he has been very, very impactful for us. Like I say, on the pitch, you know, the way I've seen him conduct himself, he always comes across as very, very kind of, I don't know the right word for it, but, you know, he comes across as, you know, really polite and really, you know, mindful. You know, I've met his mum and his sister, and they are really, really nice people. And you can see, you know, he's really respectful of his mum and stuff like that. And so it just strikes me as a bit odd. Maybe he's a bit shy. Maybe he's got, like, you know, shyness or something, and that is how he kind of deals with that. You know, kind of having to put on a different persona for that sort of thing, just to get through it. You know, because not everybody's comfortable with that sort of thing, are they? You know, not everybody's comfortable talking in front of a camera and all that kind of stuff, and self-promoting. You can still have self-belief without constantly self-promoting and so on. So yeah, that was quite interesting. A couple of other things. Transfer window. So apparently the Premier League have said that they're going to have two summer transfer windows. One from the 1st to the 10th of June, and then from the 16th of June to the 1st of September. And this is to help clubs in the Club World Cup. So for us, that would be Man City and Chelsea. Seems a bit odd, doesn't it? If they need an extra week. What's the point? If you're going to do that, you might as well just open the window on the 1st. You know, why are you closing it for 6 days? What's the benefit of that? What is the absolute point of any of that? And all just to give the clubs a chance of going off and doing better in another competition. Well, if the summer transfer window isn't due to start until the 16th of June, then in my view, you play with the players you've got. Unlucky, crack on, because that would be the same for everybody, for every club in it. So if you haven't got the players for it, then you haven't got the players for it. Then you won't do very well, will you? Either that, or just open the window for everybody and just crack on with it. Let everybody just get on with it. It's just another one of those things that seems to be overcomplicated for no need. Like for no benefit whatsoever. I just don't get it. I really don't. But listen, it's me. I'm an older fan. I kind of see things in a different way, I guess. So yeah. I don't think I've got anything else to say about that. I find it bemusing. But again, it's one of those things that they've decided is something that they need to do to support the English clubs in this competition, I guess. I'm not sure how that works for everybody else, whether everybody else is in the same boat, whether the transfer window changes for everybody else. I assume it does. So that'll be interesting for those to see whether there's any major business happen in that kind of couple of weeks, or that 10 days before it closes for 6 to open again, to see if there's anything happens from that. From our point of view, we don't sign anybody until probably the 31st of August anyway, so it probably won't matter. And the final thing I just wanted to talk about, as ever, and I don't think it's ever going to go away, is the constant managerial merry-go-round issue with Ange Postecoglou. We talked about this on the previous episode, where we were talking about Iraola and Silva, and the other one as well is Thomas Frank. So various reports coming out, as always, that Tottenham are increasingly interested in one of those three, with Iraola still being the hot favourite. Postecoglou is on the edge apparently, but I don't know why that would be any different this week than it was last week or the week before or the week before that, to be honest with you. For me, I think at the end of the day, we are so close to the end of the season, it would seem a crazy decision to change the manager before the end of the season, unless of course we go out of the Europa League. You go out of the Europa League, would you then look to change the manager? Okay, you might want to. You're not going to get relegated, so what's the benefit of that? The other managers are all in jobs, so they're not going to leave their jobs before the end of the season. No club's going to let them go before the end of the season. So it seems a bit pointless to be talking about the change of manager at this stage. I personally don't think you're going to bring anybody in that is going to have a better opportunity to win the Europa League than Ange Postecoglou, simply because he's already embedded into the club, he already knows the players, he's already got us this far, and it just seems crazy to then chuck that out the window to start again with someone new coming in with different ideas, different systems that the players have got to adapt to when you're this deep into it. If we go out of the competition, of course, there's nothing to play for. If you want to change the manager, then I'm sure that's what they'll do. But again, I don't believe that that's going to make any difference to where we end up at the end of the season, because it's just too little too late. So for me, I just think we're in the same situation as we was before. I think, Ange Postecoglou will be our manager until the end of the season, come what may. If he wins the Europa League, I think he gets a second bite of the cherry. I think maybe the club will look at it and go, well, okay, look, we've got Champions League money coming in now, and that gives us an opportunity to really invest, hopefully, and try and get us up there and buy him that additional time to see what he can do. I honestly don't think they'll change it. If he does win it, I think he'll stay. Much to the unhappiness of a lot of other people, a lot of fans. They're desperate to just see him go. I've even seen people saying, let's just get Ryan Mason in until the end of the season. I don't, and again, this is personal opinions, right? I'm not asking you to agree with me, but I just don't see the point of it personally. I really, really don't. I don't want to see Ryan Mason managing my football team again. If we're going to change our manager, I want us to change our manager for someone with a plan, someone with some longevity, where we can really build on where we've gone so far in terms of the rebuild of players and so on and so forth. I don't want us to be going backwards, starting all over again, and be in the same situation we are now in 18 months' time. We've been going through this since Pochettino left, and it's just the same old rinse and repeat. Daniel Levy should be under an awful lot of pressure because, you know, he's tried everything. He's tried to win now managers, not supported them, never got the result. So now he's gone back to a project. Well, if you're not going to back a project, then what's the point in saying you're going to have a project? Because if you don't back this one, you're then going to go, right, okay, so we start again. So you then got to start, you know, creating this new project. What does that new project look like? What does the new manager want? What sort of players is he going to want to play? What systems is he going to have? Do the players we've got fit into the system, or is this going to be another major rebuild to move us forward? So, listen, for me, I just think let's get to the end of the season. Let's see what happens at the end of the season. Let's see where we land and see where we go, and let the club make the decision then about where we go from here. But listen, this is just my view. But listen, that brings me to the end. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please do subscribe to Chris's channel. He's increasingly getting closer and closer to very, very high numbers, which is credit to the work that Chris puts in. I know he puts an awful lot of effort into this. I could do with your support. If you've liked this episode, please give me a thumbs up. Please feel free to comment in the comment section below. It'd be interested to see your comments. We do read them all and try to think about what you're saying. If you like me, if you like what I've been doing, then please do go over to my channel, Leader Dorset Spur. You'll find me there. I do a live show on a Tuesday evenings at 19:30 to review the previous week's performance and the upcoming games. I also do reviews of after each game and so on. So if you like my kind of spiel on things, then please do feel free to come over and give me a subscribe as well. It would be great to see you there. But as for now, that's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'll see you all in the next one, and as always, up the Spurs.